most people think of Social Security timing in the lens of a break-even point, meaning if you delay Social Security benefits, how long does it take for your cumulative Social Security benefits to exceed what you would have received if you had claimed earlier? In this video, I'm going to show you an example of a client that decided not to delay their Social Security benefits and why. But first, if you're new, my name is Kevin Lau. I am the host of the Planning for Retirement podcast, and I'm also the owner of Imagine Financial Security. We help individuals over 50 with over $1 million invested for retirement, maximize their retirement spending, minimize their lifetime tax bill, and worry less about the financial markets. If that describes you, make sure to subscribe to our channel and follow our podcast. And if you're interested in working with me one-on-one, you can visit my website at www.imaginefinancialsecurity.com, or you could start with the Retirement Readiness Questionnaire linked in the description below. We'd love to get to know you and learn more about how we can help in your retirement planning journey. All right, so in this past week's Whiteboard Retirement Plan, we talked about John and Jane and the fact that they unexpectedly retired in their early 60s and had been living off cash savings for the first roughly 2 years until they reached out to me initially. And John at the time was 62, so he was eligible for Social Security, but Jane was only 61, so she was not eligible for Social Security yet. And so one of the things that we were solving for, if you missed that podcast episode, was when to take Social Security and how do we align that with the rate of withdrawal and ultimately their long-term investment strategy and legacy goals. So today for this Whiteboard Fireside Chat, I wanted to pull back the curtain a little bit and show you some of the break-even points that we looked at. So not only the break-even points that are traditionally looked at in terms of cumulative Social Security benefits, but another break-even point we looked at in terms of their investable assets. And finally, we'll discuss what they ended up deciding on doing with their Social Security strategy. All right, so why don't we jump into the whiteboard here? And the first thing I want to point out with regards to Social Security is that nobody has a crystal ball, okay? And ultimately deciding on what the optimal Social Security benefit is going to be is literally impossible because that involves telling or determining exactly how long you're going to live, which we all know that is virtually impossible. Okay. And so one of the things that I oftentimes see with, Social Security calculators online or financial planning tools out there is that they have this thing sort of like what we call this optimal Social Security strategy. So I'm going to highlight this here. This is actually a snapshot from my Social Security or my financial planning tool that we use. And so if you look at this optimal strategy, what you'll notice is the default recommendation for John to claim is age 70, and same thing with Jane. So essentially both of them delaying Social Security benefits for the next 8 years for John and then 9 years for Jane ultimately, and delay that until 70. And at which point they will receive the maximum possible Social Security benefits based on their current primary insurance amount. Okay. And so the reason this is the default for this particular solution, as well as many other calculators out there, is because they're solely looking in the lens of the cumulative benefits from Social Security. Okay. And so the longer the life expectancy that is baked into the assumptions in these financial planning calculators, the more it's going to skew towards delaying Social Security. And in this case, we assume their life expectancy for both of them was age 90. Okay. So 90 would be their life expectancy. Now, you might be saying, well, if they're in their early 60s, the likelihood of them living until 90 is probably in the neighborhood of around 25 to 30%. So not super high, but ultimately when we're doing financial planning, we want to manage risk. And one of the risks that we look at with retirees is this risk of inflation. And the longer someone lives, the more inflation comes into the picture. And one of the nice things about Social Security, at least the way it's written right now, is that every year you get a cost of living adjustment, meaning whatever the CPI is, you are going to receive an increase in your benefit based on what that inflation rate was for that particular year. So it's a guarantee to keep pace with inflation for that particular amount. And so the larger your baseline benefit is when you begin claiming Social Security, the more inflation protection you have with regards to that particular risk. But again, age 90, of course, it's going to default to age 70 as the recommendation for, that optimal Social Security strategy. And so, I'm going to show you this. This is a graph that I just did in Excel. So I exported, the assumptions, that we baked in there with regards to Social Security, with regards to inflation. We built in 3% as the inflation rate. And it just, I wanted to point out this graph because it gives us a sense of why the default to a lot of these softwares is is exactly that, is this cumulative Social Security benefit. And so if you look at the blue line, I'll use blue here to kind of track with it. If you look at the blue line, obviously it's going to be winning for quite a while. And so, by the way, currently their ages are 62 and 61 when they began making these decisions. At the end of the year, John will have turned 63, but again, 62, 61 is when they ultimately began this journey of, okay, do we start Social Security? What do we do about a retirement income plan? And by the way, if you missed that Whiteboard Retirement Plan from the podcast this past week, I'm going to link it in this video. So go ahead and watch that one. And all of this will make a lot more sense in the context of their overall financial plan, overall financial goals. But if you look at the blue line, this is claiming both of them deciding to claim at 62. So as you can see, the cumulative benefits, that's going to be winning for quite a while because, for the green, which is FRA, full retirement age for John, and then at age 70 for Jane. So full retirement age, that would be 67 for him. And then, of course, 70 for Jane. So ultimately there, he'll start to receive a benefit right around that, 5.5, 6 year point, and then finally, okay, boom, now this starts to tick up a little bit. And then when Jane claims, then the benefits start to increase, whereas the 62, 62, it's going to be a steady winner for quite a while. Okay. So boom, until we hit this these crossover points here. And then the orange line, of course, this is both of them delaying for the maximum benefit at age 70. So if you look here, of course, it's going to be losing for quite a while because no benefits have started. Then John starts, then Jane kicks in. And by the way, Jane's benefit is the higher benefit amount. And that is an important fact to note. And we'll come back to that. And so if you look over here, the cumulative benefits for age 70, the crossover point at that point in time, in terms of when the cumulative Social Security benefits exceed the age 62, 62 claiming strategy is age 80 for John and age 78 for Jane. Okay, so right here, so at 80 for John and then 78 for Jane, that is the break-even point when finally they've recouped all of those payments that they missed out on because this is the time value of money, all of these payments that they missed out on, over here. Then the gap begins to close, and then the crossover point happens. And of course, this is going to continue to win because those higher benefit amounts, continue to compound with inflation. And then, over here, this would be age 90 of their life expectancy. So, of course, this would be the winner. The second best strategy, according to this graph, according to cumulative Social Security benefits, would be this scenario here, claiming at full retirement age for John, and then age 70 for Jane, and then of course the loser down here would be the earliest possible age 62, 62. Okay, but with that being said, what if they didn't live until 80 and 70? What if unexpectedly they passed away at age 78 and age 77? Ultimately, again, this goes back to we need to determine exactly what the life expectancy is to determine what the best Social Security strategy according to this. But of course, if we kind of look at the percentages and we look at, again, managing risk and one of those risks being longevity, which then brings inflation risk into the picture, of course, we're going to probably lean towards maybe delaying something. Okay. And which benefit they delay? My personal preference on this one, if there is a longevity risk in the picture, I'd much rather delay the larger of the two benefits. Okay, so I'd much rather try to delay Jane's benefit as long as possible, and the reason for that is because of the survivor benefits and how those work. So for those of you that are not familiar with this, let's say two individuals, married couple, or they're both collecting Social Security benefits, they're both eligible for their own Social Security benefits. When the first person passes away, their surviving spouse is either going to continue their own benefit or receive the survivor benefit sort of the sure up, and they'll ultimately end up taking whichever of the two is higher. So if the spouse that passed away, if their benefit was higher, the surviving spouse would go ahead and continue to collect their benefit. On the flip side, if the spouse A passes away and their benefit was lower, spouse B, the surviving spouse, would continue just to collect their own benefit. So in this case, Jane's benefit being higher, it probably makes sense for them to delay her benefit as long as possible because the survivor will step up to that specific benefit base. Okay, but again, cumulative Social Security, a very, very common way to sort of look at the break-even points and understand, okay, what makes the most sense here? Where are we going to receive the maximum amount of Social Security benefits? But another thing I'll quickly point out, I just highlighted 3 strategies on here. There are a number of different strategies you can sort of build in this hypothetical. You can have, one of them claiming Social Security at 63 or 64 or 68 or 69. There's all these different variances you can do and run. And so that's the benefit of, sort of going to the back end and playing with the calculators back in the back computer room, so to speak. But I just wanted to illustrate for this video these three scenarios. Okay, so as you can see on the surface, number one looks pretty good, and number two looks pretty good too, okay, relative to number three. And so if we just went on this particular framework in terms of cumulative Social Security benefits, we may elect to delay both benefits until 70. Okay, but what happens? What about the investment assets? And this is why I wanted to point this out to you guys. If we look at the investable assets, this is where it gets pretty interesting here. So if we look at the blue line, we've got the portfolio value, which started at $1 million inside of a retirement account, and that would be used to supplement Jane's pension. And again, go back and watch the full Whiteboard Retirement Plan. So Jane has a small pension, and then the Social Security would be that second leg of the stool, and then the investment assets and income from the investments will be that third leg. Okay, but if you look at the investable assets, they're able to kind of hold steady for a while, and the reason is because both of them started Social Security at 62 in this scenario. So they have a pretty nice cash flow. So ultimately, the rate of withdrawal on the portfolio is not super high. And actually, the assumed rate of return, which I believe was just under 6% for this particular couple, they were able to actually not only satisfy that rate of withdrawal, but actually grow the portfolio over time. Okay, now this doesn't take into consideration inflation. So this ultimately is future dollars. But if you look at the line here, it holds steady for quite a while there. All right, until about year 22. So ultimately, that would be when Jane is 81 and John is 83. This is where things begin to cross over here. So 83 and 81. Okay. So look at the green line here. This was John claiming at full retirement age and Jane at age 70. So if you look here, the portfolio balance for both of these scenarios goes down for a while, okay? And this could be uncomfortable for some individuals, but then it levels off just a little bit because then John claims Social Security at full retirement age, so kind of the line kind of flattens here, and then the portfolio is able to recover, okay, and then hits that crossover point. But look at the orange. Remember that other strategy? This strategy won in that last graph in terms of cumulative Social Security benefits. But if you look at the portfolio, it continues to dip beyond this point. So this was that point where John claimed that FRA, but he's not. He's going to continue to delay until 70. So the portfolio value continues to go down. And then when he begins to claim at 70, and then ultimately Jane begins to claim at 70, then the portfolio is able to recover here. But if you look here, this strategy came in second place. This strategy came in the first place. And then this strategy here was number 3. So in both scenarios, both looking at the cumulative Social Security benefits and the investable asset benefits, number 3 lost. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and just cross out that strategy. Okay, but the other one, it's kind of a toss-up here because if you look at the cumulative Social Security benefits, it's not that big of a gap. And I'll pull back the curtains on my software here. There's about $150,000 gap right here between scenario 1 and scenario 2. It's around $150,000 more of cumulative Social Security benefits in future dollars. Okay, so the first thing I'll sort of point out is, if you look at what this actually is, we're looking at a $3 million cumulative Social Security benefit here with both claiming at 70. That's a little bit eye-opening. Okay, this is just one married couple, not super high income. Okay, they're not even receiving the maximum possible Social Security benefit. So this just sort of illustrates why Social Security, we have some challenges here that these politicians in Washington are going to need to have to fix, is because Social Security, like I mentioned previously, was not meant to be a sort of a bedrock of a retirement income plan for 25, 30 plus years, but it is now, okay? For the baby boomers that have been retiring for a while, over the last 12, 15 years, they're receiving a substantial amount of Social Security benefits, and that's going to continue with the younger baby boomers continuing to retire as well as Gen X on the back end. But $150,000 difference of cumulative benefits versus over here, if we look at the total investable assets difference, it's about a $200,000 investable assets, about a $200,000 difference here in terms of ending investable assets, okay? So the gap on this one is around 250K. All right. And so there's definitely a decision here. It's almost like a toss up. It's like, okay, how long do you expect to live? And how important is financial legacy? And this is why every Social Security claiming decision, it's all personal preferences, and it's kind of using your best guess on this one and what makes you most comfortable. Because on the surface, if we look at the claiming Social Security at 70 for both of them, on the surface, it looks like, hey, we're going to receive the maximum benefits from there. So why not do that? Well, the downside is you're going to be putting significant pressure on this portfolio. Okay. And what if you retire into a year? What if these periods of time, like what if we're in a bear market, right? What if we're in a recession? So not only are you dipping down to your portfolio more aggressively, but you're also dipping down to your portfolio while the market's going down. Okay. So this is a factor. It's a consideration. And that's also why, even if you decide to go ahead and claim maybe the lower benefit a little bit earlier, and your plan is, okay, with the larger benefit, we're going to go ahead and delay. Don't worry about, hey, what if you need to pivot at some point? What if 1 year into retirement, all of a sudden you're in a recession and you're like, hey, this is a little uncomfortable continuing to dip into my portfolio while it's also down in value 15 or 20%. You could go ahead and claim Social Security at that point in time to recover your portfolio and begin this again. This recovery mode could happen a little sooner. So again, you don't have to just say, okay, this is my Social Security plan and then set it and forget it. It's something that you can continue to revisit on an annual basis because you can start those benefits at any time after you turn 62. So what did they elect to do? So I mentioned in the Whiteboard Retirement Plan this week, they elected for John to go ahead and start Social Security benefits at 62. They just felt uncomfortable moving into the portfolio, moving into the investment strategy, and ultimately dipping into it that aggressively. So they like the idea of Jane's pension coming into the picture as well as John's benefit. Go ahead and starting at 62. Okay, so no problem with that. And then ultimately, Jane, the plan is for her to delay until 70 because, again, her benefit is the higher benefit. She's going to go ahead and delay until 70 to receive the maximum possible. And then that will continue to inflate over the long term, the duration of both of their life expectancies. And that will also allow for that portfolio to then really recover at that point in time because the rate of withdrawal when she turns 70 drops substantially, as I illustrated in the Whiteboard Retirement Plan this past week. So why did they do this? I think the first thing is ultimately comes down to their behavioral preferences. I mentioned just now, they just felt a little uncomfortable, dipping in 8.5% as the starting rate of withdrawal. If you compare that to the 4% rule, even understanding that, hey, the 4% rule doesn't factor in the timing of Social Security, it just was uncomfortable for them to do. And I'd much rather my clients not lose sleep at night than optimize their Social Security plan. So even on the surface, the age 67 full retirement age and age 70 latest retirement age seem to be the winner, at least in my eyes, for over the next 4 to 5 years, aggressively dipping down to the portfolio with a lot of the uncertainty in the markets, that was a big thing. And that brings me to number 2, protection of assets in a downturn. Right now we've had more volatility so far in 2025 that we've seen in the last couple of years since 2022. There is a little bit of uncertainty there for someone to go into this uncertain phase of drawing down their portfolio with potentially going into recession, potentially going to a bear market. So I think it's really protecting those assets from a potential downturn. And again, Jane also has the lever at any point in time to pull, the Social Security lever. However, I'm going to coach them against that. I want her to delay benefits as long as possible, whether it be until full retirement age or ultimately until age 70. But I think this idea of preserving their assets because legacy is important to them. They do have, financial legacy goals that they want to preserve their assets for their children. So that is a factor too. They like the idea, going back to the scenario, they like the idea that, they weren't going ahead and sort of, delaying Social Security until 70 and the portfolio just can never recover. It just doesn't recover relative to strategies that you were taking earlier. Of course, it does beat out over here the age 62 strategy, but right here, I mean, what age is that? 26, 27 years down the road? So that's almost age 90, almost age 90, 80, 89 for them. Okay. So who knows if they're going to live that long. So even that strategy, claiming early at 62, assuming they don't have a very long life expectancy, that's why this strategy could be very, very popular. Because what if they only live 20 years? 20 years right here, this strategy is number 1. This is the winner, claiming at 62. So again, this is why I say it is virtually impossible to choose the right Social Security strategy. I think it's using the math talking about the overall context of the financial plan, looking at things holistically, and then going ahead and kind of make your best guess on this one, and then be flexible, be able to pivot based on what the market throws at you, what interest rates throw at you, what inflation looks like, as well as what your health and longevity, which brings up to number 3, is this idea of longevity. They have some longevity in their family, but not a ton, so they do want to protect the longevity risk, but they just didn't like the idea of deferring until 70 for both of their benefits, just because there was no guarantee making it until both of them making it until 90. So they'd much rather say, okay, let's preserve the assets, take the lower benefit early, and then we'll delay the higher of the two benefits as long as possible. God willing, health continues to be, in their favor. Maybe she does delay it until 70, and therefore there's the longest possible survivor benefit plan locked and loaded with that particular Social Security benefit. So I hope y'all found this helpful. If you liked the video, of course, make sure to like the video, and also make sure to share it with somebody who's on the verge of deciding on when to take Social Security. I think this is very important that those individuals and you all, if you're electing Social Security benefits very, very soon, very important to compare this to the context of your overall financial plan. Not just look at Social Security planning in a silo, in a vacuum. You've got to look at things holistically. So just make sure to share this with someone else who's in a similar boat, who is also facing this Social Security timing decision very, very soon. And of course, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We're putting out weekly content related to retirement planning. So if you fit the bill, over 50, you've done a good job saving and investing for retirement at this point in time, I think you'll find a lot of value in the content we're putting out. That's it for today. I'll see y'all next week.